The river. It took some time to find leaves wide and strong enough for the roof. The first batch Fred tried tore in his hands. The second turned out to have something in them that made his skin turn red and itchy. But the third tree had fleshy leaves as long as his arm. He and Leela tore them into strips, then rolled them into great squares, which they wedged in and out of the branches of the supporting trunk. Con sat on the grass outside the den, digging a hole in the ground with a twig. Fred crawled into the den and looked up. The sun no longer filtered through the 1,000 ant holes. The light inside was dark green and underwater sunken treasure colour. He felt an unexpected surge of triumph war through him. "It's good," he called. "You can barely see the gaps." He heard Leela cheer. Fred backed out of the den and stood up too fast. Suddenly his head reeled, colours flashing in front of him, his eyes, his lungs tied in a double knot. "Are you alright?" asked Leela. "I'm fine," he said, more brusquely than he'd intended. Since his pneumonia, he hated being asked if he was alright. Tried to smile. "Thanks," he added. Fred had been sent to Brazil to convalesce with a distant cousin. The cousin's idea of a good time involved more playing bridge in the dark drawing room than Fred had expected. But his father had said it was the only sensible option. "I can't be at home to look after you," he said. "The firm needs me." "I can look after myself," Fred breathed. "That's not possible," his father said gruffly. He had worked longer and longer hours each year ever since Fred could remember. Fred couldn't not remember his mother's face except when he was asleep. He'd never seen his father dressed in anything other than a suit. And over time, the suit seemed to have seeped into his father's skin. His father practically wore a tie. "You're treating me like a baby," Fred had said. "Nonsense," his father replied. "Come on, you're a sensible boy." Fred's boarding school report always contained the word sensible, an unobstructed presence in the classroom. Sometimes when they could clearly think of something else that distinguished him from his classmates, they added increasingly tall. Fred knew he was none of those things, or rather, he was tall. Nobody would have argued about that. He grew out of clothes so fast that his ankles were constantly cold, but he was not unobstructive inside, nor was he sensible. Inside, Fred was hunger and hope and wire. It was just that there had never yet been a chance to prove it. His father always insisted so unswervingly on clean shoes and unrebellious eyebrows. Fred's mind was quick and sharp edges. He wanted more from the world than it had yet given. Now, he tried to grin at Leela. "I'm just dehydrated. We need to find something to drink," he said. "You can live for a long time without eating." No, you absolutely cannot," said Max indignantly. "But you can't live for long without water." "Do you think we can drink from there?" Leela hesitated, searching in the woods for the words "tiny cesspool." Fred looked across the puddle of water. "We could, but I don't think we'd live very long if we did. But we're near a river. We must be," he said. It was on our left when we crashed, said Leela urgently. Which direction did we run? Said Con. Well, the sun rises in the east, so facing this way, left is north-east, said Fred. How does that help if we don't know which direction we ran? Snapped Con. She was pale. There was circles under her eyes, as if someone had pressed a paint-smeared thumb to her face. It doesn't match, admitted Fred, but northeast of here was England. The thump in his chest slowed a little. Northeast led to his bedroom at home. His bookcase, his cricket bat, propped up against the wall. It led to his father. Kong squared her shoulders as if readying to fight. Are we just going to guess then? I heard Fred said that you can follow ants and they'll take you water. Ants? Said Kong. We're going to take directions from ants? Leela stared hard at her hand, Kong, then at the ground, combing the leaves with her eyes. Do you have any different suggestions? She said. Kong sighed and bent to look under the log. The first set of ants was a disappointment. Max found a trail of tiny red ones and bent down to stroke them. Look, they're shining! Don't touch, said Leela, snatching them back. Some ants out here are dangerous. These ones? Asked Kong, taking a step back. I don't know, that's the problem. The dangerous ones are called bullet ants, but I don't know what they look like. Bullets, presumably, said Con. Not necessarily, said Leela. Dogfish don't look like dogs. I remember being very disappointed. These ones look like ants, said Max. You're still not allowed to touch them, said Leela, so don't try. They walked a safe distance, all four of them, with their chins on their chest along the snaking line of the trees. The ants led them to a large pile of leaves. Oh, Fred nudged the leaves with a stick, just in case there was water underneath. He recoiled. The ants were swarming over the carcass of a bird. It looked like it had once been a vulture. Now through it was equal parts of bones and smell. That isn't exactly what I was hoping for. You could not, he thought, trust an ant's sense of direction or properties. What now then? Crossing her arms. Let's try again, said Leela. Maybe those were the wrong kind of ants. It was Leela who found a trail of larger ants with heads as big as a bull bearings. They followed the tracks deep into the woods, Leela leading. Fred watched her. She was small and moved on the edge of a muscle like an animal, a deer, or a lemur, as if she said some things other people did not. I can't believe we're trusting ants, said Kong. She brushed a comb web out of her hair and ducked under a branch. Even in fairy stories, it's a wise owl or something. Nobody goes to ants for bloody help. She looked definitely at Fred as she said the word bloody. And then a thorn caught on the skin above her eyebrow and she let out a yelp. I hate this place. Fred looked back and found with a lurch to his stomach that the clearing was entirely disappeared. Which way is the way back? He said. The green of the forest seemed to thrum around them. Left at that tree that was covered in mushrooms, and then right at the bush with green thorns, said Con. She didn't look at him, didn't see the surprise on his face. Then he immediately tried to hide. We should mark a path, he said, so we can find our way back. Fine, said Con. Unless you want to ask the opinion of, I don't know, a passing maggot. Fred tried to grin. Well, maggots are much slower walkers than ants. They make terrible guides. She didn't smile back. Fred slipped to the back of the procession. Every 3 or 4 trees he broke a branch and the stuck of leaf on the hinge it made. Kong shook her head. That's not going to be any good. Need something bigger. She tore off ruffles of her once white blouse and tied it to a tree. There. Fred turned to look at her, crouched and dappled light. She moved stiffly and unaccustomed to her, using her own body, and her curls seemed to sit on her like a bear trap. There are outfits that suggest of their own accord that their owner should sit still and smell nicely. Kong had been dressed in one such outfit before the crash had coloured it brown and green and red. Good thing you've got ruffles to spare, he said, and grinned. Kong turned at him the kind of look that breaks noses. Shut up, cricket jumper. Fred took a step backwards. I only meant it's useful having clothes with extra bits attached. Boys, clothes don't. Fine, whatever you say. You don't have to try and be nice to me, you know. What? Fred started, bewildered. I just want to get out of this wild place and back to school. I don't mean to be rude, but I'm not really interested in making friends, especially not with little kids. Leela heard them. I'm not a little kid, she said quietly. She spoke with taking her eyes off the ants. I'm just small for my age. How old are you? Con turned to Fred. Fred told her. But that's hardly older than me, said Con. And me? I thought you were much older. Fred shrugged. I'm just tall, he said. That means there's no adults. Not any nearly adults. Just 4 children in the Amazon jungle. That's, said Fred. Sounds true. Unfortunately, said Leela. Unfortunately, echoed Max. He wandered off a few paces, blowing nose bubbles with his lot. Leela darted after him and grabbed him by the sleeve. Stay close, she said. Her face was bones and eyes and nerves. As they walked on the smell, Fred could on the smell on the air. Something sharp and fresh, something that smelled more blue than green. Is that the river? I think I can smell it, he said. Don't be ridiculous, said Kong. You can't smell water. But then she broke off through the thickly ranged trees. Fred could see the flickering of something that moved. Come on, called Con. I found the river. They stood where the ground curved down to meet the river. The river was dark, bright blue. Do you think that are salmons? Leela said. Despite the sun overhead, she shivered. In the long winter of Fred's illness, he'd read dozens of books about explorers venturing out into the wild, armed with only a pith helmet and a penknife. He had a shelf full of all dog-eared and food-stained, and they all dwelt at the great length of caimans. He decided to be honest. Probably, he said, but I don't know how else we're going to get water. Why the salmons? What are salmons? She asked Con. Alligators, said Fred, like crocodiles, but with longer snouts. But they're smaller, said Leela. Probably. Probably? Asked Con. Oh, good. The salmon like the sunny side of the bank, said Leela, and wind is shaded, so we're probably fine. Everything's a risk, said Fred. I'm going in. With every hair on his arm stood on the edge as he scanned the bank. He pulled off his t-shirt, then put it back on again. It occurred to him that it needed washing as much as he did. He slipped back down the bank, his feet squelching in the mud, and dived in head first. The river was a gift. It soothed the burn of his cut and the ache of his feet. Fred trod the water, then kicked downwards below the surface where it was colder, and sucked in a mouthful of water. It had a tang of mud to it, and a strand of waterweed wrapped itself around his tongue. But at that moment, it was the most delicious thing he'd ever drunk. Better than hot chocolate at Christmas or fresh lemonade in the winter. Come on, he called. Leela plunged in after him, carrying Max on her shoulder. Con hesitated on the edge, her face stiff and anxious. We didn't do swimming at school, she said. Only ballroom dancing. She entered the water slowly and swam in a nervous, dodgy paddle, her chin high above the water. Fred rubbed his hand and legs, feeling his cuts sting as he scrubbed the dirt off them, then kicked below the surface again. His eyes open in the dark water. A shoal of miniature fish swam by, followed by a single larger one. He came up for air. There's fish, he called. Try to catch one, called Con. Fred plunged down again. The smaller fish darted away as he grabbed at them. The larger fish ignored him completely, but there was something eerie in its shape. Almost circular, like a swimming dinner plate. The fish turned, it bared its teeth at him. Fred sucked in a lungeful of river water and shot coughing up to the surface. Piranhas, he yelled. Get out! Max was floating near here. Fred grabbed him and struck out for the bank, fear pounding through his limbs. What are piranhas? Con asked. Fish with teeth. Con screamed a word Fred hadn't expected her to know, then swallowed a mouthful of water and disappeared under the surface. Leela, wild-faced, grabbed Con by the shoulders. Don't thrash, she said. She hooked one arm on Con's waist, kicking for the shore. Just breathe. Fred and Max scrambled up the bank. Con and Leela just behind them. They lay panting on the hot earth. Con let out a groan and spat out a mouthful of weeds. Fish! Fish with teeth! Nothing is safe here. You can't even trust fish. Not to eat, you. What else? Pigeons with fangs? Monkeys with guns? I read, Fred gasped, that they don't bite unless they're hungry. They mostly eat small things. You know, birds and frogs, said Leela. She wrung out her hair. It was almost covered in dusting of red-brown river silt. It looked. Fred drew in a great breath and felt his heart began to slow. It was going to do anything. It was actually quite beautiful. Silver with a red belly. Beautiful, said Con incredulously. As long as we're not bleeding into the water, we won't attract them, said Leela. I knew that, but I panicked. We're still safe to swim here. I think they'll ignore us. You think? Con was red in the face, sharp-boned, ferocious. They're fish with teeth, piranhas. You can't physicalize them. Leela looked at Con. Her face was indestructible. I think, she said, that the plural of piranha is piranha, not piranhas. Oh, good, said Con. It's always nice to be grammatically correct when you're being eaten. Then they padded damply back to the clearing. Leela used her wet shirt to wipe the mud off Max's face as they went. Their bodies steamed in the sun as they dried. Coming back into the clearing felt something surprisingly like coming home. A scarlet parrot, all alight on a branch above Fred's head, called in surprise at the band of dripping children and took off again. Fred found the sharpest of the flints and hacked off the bottom of his grey school trousers, making them into rough edge shorts. The left leg was longer than the right, but he decided it didn't matter. The cut on his leg had begun to scab nicely. He pulled off his cricket jumper and swung it around. Something in Fred began to glow. Under the sun and the crying bird, the great expanse was vivid green around them. It was huge, dizzying. It felt like hope. Either that, he thought, or a concussion.